foremost, thank you all for attending the Pacific Pinball Expo. We're going to share our mission, our dreams, and our hopes with you. I'd like to introduce MIchael Schiess and Larry Zartarian.
Thanks, everybody. Larry, you're first.
Anyway, that's all right. Good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here this year for the 6th Annual Pacific Pinball Expo. I want to thank everyone for coming out. I'm Larry Zartarian. I'm the chairman of the board. Mike here, Mike Schiess is our executive director. What we're going to do is we thought we'd spend some of your valuable time away from the show by telling you some of what some recent accomplishments have been, tell you where we are today, and tell you some really exciting news about our future. Of course, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We have 12 board members, been around for about 10, almost 11 years now. We are located in Alameda, California. And we do have a mission statement, that is to inspire an interest in science, art, and history through pinball, and to preserve and promote pinball machines as important examples of uniquely American popular culture. That's always been our mission statement, and it always will be. We don't have any intentions of being just an arcade where people can come and hang out or be some sort of club with a clubhouse, do cool stuff legally or illegally. We really want to focus on art, science, history, that make pinball be sort of the golden carrot to get people through the door and make it a very educational and very fun experience. So again, it's entertainment, of course, it's fun like pinball, but we want it to be educational as well. We are as I said, we are a nonprofit. We have 4 venues. The Pacific Pinball Museum is in Alameda, California, just south of Oakland. Hope a lot of you have been there in person to come and see what we're talking about here. It's about 4,600 square feet. In size, we have room to house about 100 of our machines at any given time that we rotate in and out. But we have a collection of 650 to almost 700 pinballs right now. So this is a rather small space, but it's been growing over time. And as it's grown and evolved, our organization has evolved. So we've changed our name from the Lucky Juju Arcade, which is how it got its humble start 11 years ago, thanks to Mike. Evolved into the Neptune Beach Amusement Museum, and now the Pacific Pinball Museum. Again, over 12 years operating history, that's what happens when you evolve. You tend to change and grow. The Lucky Juju Art Gallery is one of the rooms in the museum itself where we have art exhibits on pinball as art or various installations by local artists. The Pacific Pinball Exposition, which you're attending this afternoon. This is not the Pacific Pinball Museum. This is the Expo. The Expo is something that the museum puts on once a year. People ask us, they wander in and they say, wow, I finally made it to your museum. This is great. This is fantastic. How long have you guys been around? I come to San Rafael and I don't usually see you guys here. You're only open once a year? The answer is the Pacific Pinball Expo, which we started about 6 years ago, is the brainchild of one of our board of directors. We thought, wouldn't it be awesome to just have a kick-ass pinball show here in the Bay Area and incorporate some of the best elements of all the other pinball shows around the country? Because I think it was referenced earlier that Chicago has an expo once a year. They're in their 26th or 27th year. And in Chicago, they have the benefit of having the industry designers, the industry artists, the historians, all the local Illuminati and whatnot. So they have interesting seminars, but they don't have much in the way of games, maybe 70 to 120 games at any given time. Our emphasis is really on the games themselves. And not just games of a particular era, but we have games here in the historical section going all the way back to 1896. Some from the 1930s, first use of electricity, first bumper, first flipper game, first wedge head, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to, again, make it very educational and turn it into sort of a kind of equivalent to a one-way ticket to a permanent state of pinball nirvana. That's what we like it. Not round trip, but one way. That 3-day phenomenon that we enjoy putting on here is really great and all, but we really want our museum, permanent home of the museum, to look and feel exactly like this. Only it'll be hopefully twice as large, have a gift shop, oral history section, a restaurant, restoration classrooms, place for storage of games, have everything that you would expect to see in a first-class museum that's very Smithsonian-like. We'll talk a little bit about more of that a little bit later. We do have the Little Juju Mobile Pinball Museum, which is basically a 1947 Air Spartan Manor trailer that's capable of holding about 7, 8 pinball machines and a jukebox.
6 and a jukebox.
And a jukebox. We take it to interesting corporate events, parties, and people just love this thing. They say, man, this is so much sight. This is cool. Pinball on the go. We've taken it to Maper Fair. Locally won some Blue Ribbon Awards with that. As I said, we are dedicated to the preservation of pinball, art, science, and history. Now, you might ask yourselves, what's the deal with the art and the science and the history? Why don't we just open this big arcade? We've got all these machines, and why don't we just coin them all up, turn them like you'd see at a giant laundromat or Funland or something? And we could even be like a Chuck E. Cheese with coin spewing tokens. This art and science and history thing is kind of highbrow, who's interested in that stuff? I just want to play pinball. Well, the reason is, no one else is really doing this. Tim's presentation, he talked about other efforts of people that are trying to open museums. They don't seem museum-like or educational-like if you're not talking about the history of what you're even trying to educate people that are coming to see you. You're having fun, playing pinball, drinking beer, doing other things that people do at arcades, but if you're going to call it a museum, it seems to me to be educational. At least have some semblance of learning about history. Science and art, we hope to gather corporate funding, foundation money, grant money, and there's a lot of money out there available, but you have to prove that you're providing some sort of service to the community, and that's the way we're going to do that. So again, we've got all these machines, and we could go that route of just being a giant arcade, but that isn't what we want to do and never will be. The current state of the museum's collection is we have about 700 machines currently, room to exhibit about 100 in a 4,500 square foot space. We do have several collections that have historical significance dating back to 1898 to present, thanks to very generous donations from collectors like Gordon Hossey, who's here in the room tonight, and also Richard Conger and a gentleman named Richard Foos, who is the founder of Rhino. Most recently, Richard Foos, who is the founder of Rhino Records in the early 60s. He sold his company to Time Warner in the late 90s. He donated 120 or so. He was a collector of various pieces of Americana, Coke machines, jukeboxes, oddball, Chicago coin basketball, champ shooters, and things like that. So that was nice. And we are in line to receive a very substantial collection from a local collector here by the name of Richard Conger in the next few years. And I don't really want to go into the specifics of his collection because his wife might be in the room, and I don't think she knows how many machines Richard actually has. But suffice it to say that our collection is expected to grow from the current 700 number to upwards of 1,000 to perhaps even 1,500 in a very short time, 2 to 3 years. The whole reason why our structure works as well as it does, we are solvent, we're a nonprofit, not a lot of nonprofits can say that, is because of the support and the enthusiasm and the passion of local volunteers here in the Bay Area. So that, I think, and a vibrant board of directors of 12 members really does help separate us and our structure from other attempts to set up museums or arcades, whatever they happen to be. In other words, what we're doing right now in 2012, hopefully 10 years from now, Mike and I and every member of our board of directors are going to be 10 years older. We're planning for the future of what happens 10, 20, 30, 50 years in a row. We don't want to just be around today. We don't want to be at risk of just having a key man out of the picture and the whole thing falls apart. So we think the structure that we put in place will allow us to do that, not just now, but in successive generations. I'm going to let Mike talk about kind of how the museum got its start and how we've evolved over the years and why it is that we've had multiple names.
Great, lay that one on me. That one's difficult to explain. Thanks for everybody coming tonight. This has evolved over 10 years now, which started out as kind of a need for a place to have pinball machines, and that eventually evolved into a need to preserve pinball machines when we discovered that nobody was really preserving these things. Really hit home when the Smithsonian, I got an email and they said, yeah, we have pinball, we have 3 of them. And they had some cool ones, I gotta admit. They had the original parlor bagatelle that M. Redgrave used to get his patent. They have that actual pinball machine in their collection. They have a jigsaw, Rockhold, it's a nice one to have. And they have a Roger Sharp sharpshooter. And on display at the Smithsonian, which kind of led to this whole thing, they had a Ms. Pac-Man video game. and it's a little, it's hard to swallow that the greatest America's addict, as they call themselves, wasn't going to bother to collect pinball machines. And the reason's pretty simple. It's hard work. It's very hard work. When my brother Christian helped me move my first batch of machines, he said, gee, I wish you'd taken up stamp collecting. It's, I harken back to the Lucky Juju days when, yeah, we had beer cup holders, beer holders on the machines, 1 room, EM machines. It was fun. And I love those days. And it'd be great to get back to that. But that isn't going to happen. And I'll tell you why. Because even though I would love to do that, and it'd make my life a lot easier, it's not really what the goal of this whole organization is. The goal is to make this available for future generations. I get a little worried when I see other museums sprouting up and everything with no contingency plan. Even National Pinball Museum, pretty much run by 1 person, doesn't have a fallback plan, and that's scary. The government isn't going to be doing this. They might give us some grants or things like that, but the Smithsonian, which it's not really a government institution, but it is, it's an American institution, and if they're not going to do it, I can't see anybody else doing it except us. And when I say us, I mean that we are going to have to reach outside the pinball community. Because the pinball community, although they love pinball, they're not necessarily thrilled with museums. The differences between Tim's place and our place, the fact that we have certain accoutrement that lack at his place. It's very important to us. His role is to supply money to another nonprofit, and that's great. And he's keeping pinball alive and available to people who just want to go in and play pinball. But there are other people who don't even know about pinball and would perhaps like to learn about the art of it or some of the history or the science behind it. And that's where we come in. We're going to be we're a stable organization. We pay our staff, limited staff that we have, and we keep our budget down. We're able to actually save money, and we're working towards this goal. So, I'll give it back to you.
Yeah, Mike's being very modest here when he makes reference to a paid staff. As an executive director of a nonprofit, you're entitled to pay at least 1 or 2 staff members. It's not like everybody that works or does a shift at the museum is actually compensated. Mike's compensation works out to probably $1.25 an hour and all the pinball you can play. We don't bother with stale popcorn, foisting that on customers because we dig into our own pockets to pay that salary. We think it's worth it in spades. So just in terms of some of the milestones that we've accomplished, this is our 6th Pacific Pinball Expo. We like to think it is the world's largest pinball show. It certainly has the most number of machines under one roof. I think at any given time we have close to 400 this year. A couple of years ago I think we had close to 430. We're really not trying to establish any kind of records though, but it does show that it can be done, at least proof of concept. Most recently we've doubled the size of our existing museum in Alameda to about 4,500 square feet. We are open 6 days a week, 61 hours a week. I mentioned earlier the acquisitions of Richard Conger, Richard Foose, and Gordon Posse collections. We've basically validated the concept that a museum based on pinball can actually work. we are viable, we are making money. It's not like we're sinking. We have a very world-class historical archive with advertising paper, game flyers that were sent to distributors, thanks to Gordon Posse, that were in the Dick Buchel collection. We've made a Pioneers of Pinball film series where we've interviewed Wayne Nyans, who's now 94 years old, and he has the distinction of designing over 160 games in a four-decade career at Gottlieb. Many of his games are on display at the show. We've also made a film on Gordon Posse, who has a lot to say. He says it very well. We've referenced the Maker Faire, where we take the Little Juju's trailer. We won Best of Show there. But again, what we need to really do now is focus on developing our science and art curriculum that we can appeal to 2nd through 5th, 6th graders and up. We do have field trips, full busloads full of kids that come to the museum, not just to play pinball and hang out, but to actually learn about concepts such as science. That's a no-brainer, right? I mean, you've got physics, law of gravity, you've got how magnetism works, algebra, mathematics, geometry, the way a ball bounces around on a playfield. It's kind of a no-brainer. The art and the history are a bit of, I don't want to say a reach, but if you look at the back glasses and you see what was being depicted on them, it gave you an idea of what was happening in pop culture in the country at the time. And art, you've seen the many murals that we have hanging in the show this year. We've now up to 22 of those we've commissioned by 4 different artists. We have actually spoken at the Smithsonian Institution. We had a very successful San Francisco Airport Museum exhibit last year, the year before last. Lasted about 6 months. We had a kind of a history of pinball in a 40-foot glass booth. It's very well attended. And then most recently, we sold one of the clear pins. I think you saw on the show floor the 2 Valley Freedoms side by side, the EM version and the solid state version. We recently sold one of them to the Exploratorium. The Exploratorium, for those of you that don't know, is a hands-on interactive science museum here in San Francisco at the Palace of Fine Arts. They've been there for 43 years. It's a very successful institution. It was founded by the brother of J. Robert Oppenheimer, otherwise known as the father of the atomic bomb, who himself was an interesting scientist. And he had a mission to make a hands-on science museum. And these guys are really successful. They drew over 560,000 visitors last year alone. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more on them in just a second, but we'll want to go into a little bit more detail about the science and art and the history of what we're doing now.
Well, one thing that my wife Melissa pointed out to me about our museum that's pretty cool, that when you're sitting in the thick of it, you just don't see these things. People come into our museum and it's almost like water finding its level. They just spread. If a family comes in, occasionally they'll group around a machine and they'll explore it, and then they kind of filter off, and they each find their own thing that they're interested in. And I've worked at the Exploratorium, and I used to go on the floor there and watch people, and they'd kind of struggle with an exhibit here and bang on some buttons here and there. And I always loved the Exploratorium, but I noticed that it wasn't a real easy thing to get into. You had to work hard. With our place, it's great. You've got all this eye candy. You got all this art on the back glasses, and it was designed to catch your eye. I mean, and it works. It always did work. So that's what's incredible about it. Makes it a little bit easier in doing a museum like this, because it pretty much it's self-attracting, and it distributes the load evenly. People just kind of spread out and explore their own little whatever they want. Some people come up and they want to know about some of these early machines, like why has that one got nails in it, and they want to understand the evolution of it. We have that on display. Some of them make a beeline for the new games. That's all they want to do is play a new game. But most of them come through the front where we have older machines, and they learn how to play them. And after 3 years of that, I've been noticing that at our show here at the PPE, that they're playing them now. The machines where everybody complained, oh, there's not enough new machines. Well, now I notice that people are playing the older machines, and that was a huge success for us. The other thing that's incredible is that, as Larry pointed out, we have 22 murals up there. And we have a mural program now. We wrote a grant and got a matching grant. We raised $8,000, they matched it with $8,000. So now we have a slush fund to pay artists for even more murals. And there's a lot out there to do. We have, Dan Foss started the program, Ed Castle joined it, Eric Koss came on board, and now Darcy, Bruno, and Rosie Morales, Rosie Morales are doing some of the incredible ones, like they did the Slick Chick out there, which is quite a masterpiece when you look at it. Even if you think of it as a back glass, you still got to look at it, and it's an amazing painting, the detail behind it. When the clear pinball got sold, it was not sold as an exhibit, it was sold as an art piece, strangely enough. That's how they look at it. And it had been in a few art galleries. That was a pretty big achievement to get something like that in there, because the Exploratorium's a world-class organization, and for them to pick one of our pieces is pretty incredible. The other thing that does is it really puts it out there. We've been doing a strong campaign trying to get people interested in pinball, with the little juju going all around, putting the clear pinball out there, doing all these events, and it's paying off. People are finding out about us. We do Groupons, which might hurt us a little financially, but it gets the word out. There's a misnomer about that you have to pay to go into the museum, and I know a lot of people are going to hate me when I say this. You don't have to pay to come into the museum. Anybody can come in and look at and go through the museum. The only time we charge you is if you want to play the machines. So we go way beyond the call of a nonprofit museum, because we will let anybody into our museum, and we'll gladly explain anything about any machine, and they can stay there until they push that start button on the machine. And then they got to pay. And that's our way of spreading pinball love, pinball info on this. We also have a community library program where we have 5 counties around Alameda County. They all have libraries that offer a family program. So every day, up to 20 people come in free from this library system to our museum. And we eat all these costs. So we give away quite a bit to the community. I don't know how many free passes we give away to schools, to fundraisers, and things like that. And I know some people have a problem with the coin versus admission method. The coin method is great. We would make a lot of money. I would love to do it. It's a little bit more hassle, but the payoff is huge. The disadvantage is it's illegal in our town. You cannot run a coin pinball machine. You can run one in a bar, but you can't run one with just pinballs. So we're stuck. We get around it in one sense. We have new machines up front, where if you are a player and you want to come in and play some of the new machines, we have them up front, and you can play them to your heart's content. All the ones behind the rope require an admission, and that's kind of our way of serving both classes of pinball people. So when you come to our place, you get more than just playing pinball. You get an experience. You get the experience of everything that pinball is, not just the game, everything behind it. And we have all this information available, and we disseminate it as much as possible. One of the other things that we do that's kind of neat is working with people like Wade Krause and Dirty Donnie and Tanya Kleiss, Jerry Ellsworth, to make art out of these things. Dan Kramer also gets involved. And they make, one of the first things Wade and I did was a visible pinball. And then they did the helicopters together, and they did some work for Metallica. And this has kind of spurred this whole movement now. I don't know if you noticed, but everybody's like getting excited about making their own pinball machines. And it's kind of the reason I got into this was I always thought pinball was an art form. Now they're making kind of the paint kit for pinball. It's basically, they're creating tools that allow you to program your own, your own computer to make your own game. They have routers available, and things are, the whole Maker Faire movement is allowing people to make their own pinball. And this is exciting not only for players, but for artists who are making all sorts of crazy stuff. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen with this. And it's not only going to explode on the, it's already kind of gone quite a ways in the video realm, in the virtual pinball realm, but also in the physical realm, it's going to get crazy because there's more and more things that become available. Let's see. So after we, what's that? Oh, no, we're not playing. Oh, okay. Well, I know that. No, we're going real slow. Sorry. So the next project was the Freedom Project to demonstrate. It was part art, more science. To take the same pinball machine that was made out of an electromechanical, and they made the first electronic machine. So we made that, and that's going to be going into the museum pretty soon. We're working on a set of exhibits that a particular museum actually requested. They got interested in the visible pinball machine, and they said, "What else do you have?" So I laid out all these plans for pinball-related exhibits, and they got real excited. So it looks like we're going to be developing a set of pinball exhibits that will be leased to other museums. We hope to continue this, basically taking what were exploratorium science exhibits that explain things like magnetism or gravity, vacuums, all sorts of things. We're using pinball to do that. And the reason they're using pinball is, A, it's cool. You can use the pinball graphics to make it more exciting and fun. But pinball machines, they get the shit kicked out of them, and they keep on ticking. And I, as a exhibit repair person that gets sent all over the world to fix the science exhibits that little kids beat the crap out of, I came back with the idea of, wow, wouldn't it be cool to build them out of pinball machines, and then they wouldn't last a little longer. So that's kind of where that's coming from. Then we got into, well, I need to catch up on this thing, sorry. The next one is, we started getting into documenting the history, and that's where Larry comes in.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, most recently, a couple of years ago, we decided to embark on a Pioneers of Pinball series where we were going to document actual interviews with actual designers and artists of pinball so we could preserve them for future generations to come, not just for current generations of pinball enthusiasts. Wayne Nyans, who I referenced earlier, designed over 160 games in over a 50-year career with Gottlieb. It's unfortunate that he wasn't able to be here tonight. He's 94 years old. He wanted to come out and see our show. It would have been the highest number of wood rail games that he ever created, all under one roof, operating at one time. So it's disappointing that he couldn't see that. But it's really important because if we don't preserve this kind of stuff, this kind of knowledge, this oral history, as it were, it's going to be lost forever. I mean, just earlier this year, Steve Kordick designed so many games at Williams. He died at age of 101. How is he going to tell his stories now? Who's going to know about his stories? These guys are gone. They're gone forever. And the information goes with them. So we want to really create a valuable research database, not only for today, but literally for future generations to come. So far, we've made 2 films on Wayne Nyans. The second one that was produced just a few months ago is going to be screened.
Yesterday.
Oh, it was screened yesterday. I'm a little, I don't even know what day it is today. We're kind of busy with the show. And we've also got Gordon Posse walking around explaining rule sets and criteria and basic history of a lot of wood rail games, so that's really interesting too. We want to expand that. I think now we're this one.
No.
Really?
I didn't answer. That's screw it up. Right, there we go.
Yeah, so we've told you a little bit about the science, we've told you a little bit about the art and the history, and that's all a function of the museum itself. Now, as an adjunct of that, the Pacific Pinball Museum, is a sponsor, and we put on this Pacific Pinball Exposition. As I said, this is our 6th one. This year we've got close to 400 machines, going back from 1898, early 20s, 30s, where wood whales, wedge heads, all the way up to solid states, DMDs, the most recent X-Men, and then recently unveiled this morning, the Wizard of Oz, Jersey Jack. We, like other pinball shows, have seminars too on pinball art and history, repair, and design. And then the backglass murals capturing literally pop culture in the country at the time. And we have science exhibits. If you go back to our historical section toward the rear end of the hall on the left side, you see some interesting exhibits to teach kids about magnetism and electricity, gravity, and various things we have on loan from the Exploratorium. So a very strong collaboration with them. And we actually have tournaments for all different classes of players. So that's fun too, and that attracts a lot of people.
So besides the PPEs that we do, we also put together shows that we have out in the community during the year. And Melissa and David Golansky curated a few shows. And we get a lot of volunteers to come in and help. We did a Pinball Oddity, which was a really cool show that just featured rare machines. Some of them are out on the floor. And some of the murals and some of the smaller stuff, the smaller murals that Castle has painted. And then David and Melissa put together a whole thing on Bagatelle, and I swore I'd never see a pachinko machine in a museum, but sure enough, there was a pachinko machine. And I actually played it, and it was fun, gotta admit. So it was Bagatelle, pachinko, and Peggle. And Peggle was kind of the digital version of Bagatelle and pachinko. So it was kind of neat. It showed a really cool evolution from the very simple, marble and nail game, all the way up to this digital version of this thing with, incredible colors. And when you get the ball in the right place, it plays the Ode to Joy, and all these fireworks go off. I mean, I got addicted. I was thinking that people would go around later going, paddle, paddle. I didn't get sucked in that far though. But it was pretty incredible. Ed Castle put together the murals and got together with Uptown Body in Oakland and did an incredible show with the murals in there. It just blew people away. And this is during the Art Murmur, which is the first Friday in Oakland. I don't know if you ever heard about it. It's world famous at this point, where the street's just a mob of people looking at art. And the murals there were a huge hit. Rock, Paper, Scissors, another gallery about a year later, same thing. Oakland's art, what they call the Art Murmur, and just an incredibly successful show. I've been taking a little juju down to the night market at Jack London Square, and that's got to be one of the best ambassadors of pinball ever. People come up and see this big shiny tray that looks like a robot loaf of bread that's in a hurry, and it's full of jingle jangle pinball machines, and it's sitting on legs. It's got hydraulic legs, so it levels itself. They're just like, what the hell is that? Sometimes we're doing private parties like we did at Bar Mitzvah in Oakland, and people are just walking by, and they got to stop. Well, what is this thing? And we're here at Cert Car. So we're handing out cards all the time, telling about the expo, telling about the museum, just spreading pinball love all over. The Maker Fair is another huge one. That's probably our biggest. We go there, and this isn't done by, this is a lot of people putting this together, because it's a burnout. It's a huge thing. As soon as we open the doors, the little juju just packs, and we had it surrounded with 2 clear pinballs, all this other stuff that we made, and it's just a huge saturated commercial for pinball, and it has had an effect. I think everybody can agree. Pinball's on the rise in the Bay Area. I know we can't take all the credit for it, but we're going to take a lot of it, because we've been working really hard on this, and I think we deserve that. I talked a little bit about the murals grant. And if you are interested in getting a mural done, you can put one up for a vote. Basically, the artists get to be the ultimate choosers. So think like an artist before you make a pick for that. Eric has been cranking out murals really quickly, and he just finished the last one right before we came to the show, which was Card Whiz. Paint's barely dry on that one. And it's incredible. And Dan and Ed, Eric, and Darcy, they're just incredible at how they work at this stuff. And it takes them months to paint these things. And I'm not sure, but I think a lot of people come into the floor there, and they think they're just big prints. They have no idea that these things took months and they're hand painted. But anybody who would go up and look at it closely would, obviously see how much goes into it. And that's part of what we do. And it's also on their part, it's incredible that they do this for us. Because basically our arrangement is we give them some seed money and some material money, and then they go and paint it. We don't own them, they own them. If they can sell them and we get our seed money back. We get to use them in the meantime, and we try to advertise them. So if you've ever needed that nice mural for your special game room, now's the time to get them, because they're going at bargain prices right now. So the other thing we do is a lot of community service. And the reason we had to use these generic photos is because all mine were blurry. But we do a lot with Girls Inc. They've been coming there since day one. And it's really a lot of fun to get little kids in there playing pinball, because you can see it happening. You can see them go up to that machine, and then they figure it out. They pull that puncher bag, and they're experiencing pinball like we experienced it if we did when we were kids. And they get enraptured, and they get, that bond happens. I've literally seen it happen not only at the museum, but out on the floor here, when a grandfather comes in and with his grandson. Grandfather probably hasn't played a pinball machine in 30 years. Grandson's never seen one. And somehow they are bonding together on a machine or a couple machines playing against each other. And it just really, I almost broke into tears one time. It was just like, I was looking at it, and it just really melted my heart to see that. To see that not only was it, we're carrying on this thing that we love, but it was actually making this bond, a familial bond. And that's another key thing that our museum does, is we encourage families to come in. I think other places, they don't really care, just come on in. We really want families to come in. That's why we do the library program. We want families to come in, and we want them to have a good time. And on top of that, we'll even bend the price of admission. If somebody has a hard time paying it, then my wife's all too eager to jump the price down. But it has a good effect. The long run is that we are exposing it to more and more people. And yeah, it might not be good business sense, but it makes good sense in the long term. So I'm going to turn it back to Larry.
So for those of you who haven't actually been to our museum in Alameda, near Oakland, California, just these few pictures here, slides, show exactly what the museum looks like when you walk in the front door. We have a kiosk where people pay an admission price to get in. The machines are all set on free play. We have in and out privileges. We're open 6 days a week, till midnight Friday and Saturday. And what we see in the front room are earliest historical games dating back to the late 1800s, the earliest bagatelles, a couple of those. A baffle ball, a bumper, Valley Bumper, 1936, first game with bumpers. Humpty Dumpty, first game with flippers, 1947. So some very important milestones to show people how pinball has evolved over the years. I think a lot of people coming in contact with pinball for the first time don't realize that these things have been around for not all that long. It's only been 100 years or so, a little over 100 years, but they have evolved, and it's interesting how they've evolved. I hope some of you, or you've all got a chance to see the historical section that we have of the show this weekend. You can see it for yourself. Again, we don't want to put these things behind velvet ropes. like automobile museums. Oh, look at the cool chrome on the Duesenberg, or through glass cases. They were meant to be played, enjoyed, and interactive. They're kinetic sculptures, as it were. That's part of the whole visceral experience. As you move into the museum, you can see our amusement gallery, where we have things like a valley spinner and various oddball things like the ringer, the Williams ringer, the horseshoe game, where you turn a wheel. We just don't know how to classify things like that. Valley circus, or a little bit of the science now. We have the clear pin there, but we really want to display that in our art gallery, in the center of the room, where we have various exhibits, either as pinball as art, or art as pinball. And then we have rooms dedicated strictly to the solid state machines. Can't imagine why anyone would want to play a DMV or solid state game, but they do. People really like this stuff. I can't imagine why. And then we do have other rooms that are dedicated to EMs and games from the 60s and 70s, which are nearer and dearer to my heart. Now, I mentioned earlier that we have some interesting news as we evolve and move forward. And that is, that as many of you know, after 6 years of putting on this show, we've come to the realization that what we really need to do now is focus our energy and our efforts at getting a permanent home that's much larger than our current home. I mean, we have 700 machines in the collection now. They're estimated to grow up to 1,000, perhaps 1,500 machines in the next 3 years. We have no place to put all the games that we have now, at least to display them all. What we really need is a larger destination, permanent, and it really needs to be not in the East Bay, right? We've been in Alameda since day one. We've looked at Oakland, we've looked at Berkeley, we've looked at various sites in Emeryville. They're just not destinations. People don't go there from out of town. What we need is a successful demographic. I think as Tim experiences in Vegas, is tourists. It's not just locals that keep you in business and thriving. Not just getting by, but actually thriving. We get locals and we get hardcore pin fanatics, 2 of the 3 pieces. The third piece is tourism. And the only way we're going to do that is to be located in a major metropolitan city. And San Francisco has become now at the top of our list. We have certain sites in mind, but at the very top is the Palace of Fine Arts. This is a building that's very beautiful to look at. If you look at it closely, you can see it actually already has a pinball on top of the dome. And it's not chrome, it's actually marbleized like it would have been in the early 20s or 30s. This building was actually erected for the Panama Pacific International Expo back in 1915, sort of equivalent to a World Fair. And about 8 or 9 buildings were actually erected for that expo, and this is one of the 8 or 9 that was left standing. The Maytag family had a lot to do with that expo, by the way, of washing machine fame. So the Exploratorium, the hands-on science museum that we talked about a little bit, has been there since 1969, 43 years. It's one of the nation's first science, art, and human perception museums. If any of you have ever been there, the interactive exhibits are really interesting for adults and kids of all ages. Last year, the Exploratorium drew 560,000 visitors. Of that, 60% to 65% were actually from California. Another 10% were from out of the country. And their breakdown is, the demographics is about 60% adults, 35 or 40% kids. About 22 to maybe 25% of the visitors actually became members. And that's another thing we have in mind, is to have memberships for different family levels. And it's about 132,000 square feet, and if you've ever been here, there are beautiful, stunning views of the Golden Gate Bridge and Chrissy Field right nearby, just across the small street there. So it really is a world-class tourist destination, as it were. People likely to go to San Francisco from the East Coast will come to downtown, maybe the Museum of Modern Art, maybe go to the Jewish Contemporary Museum, or various art museums downtown. But chances are they're not going to rent a car and drive across the Bay Bridge to Alameda just to see a pinball museum. But if we were in San Francisco, they wouldn't have to do that. Now, we've taken a quick look at the numbers of exactly how many visitors we would need to make the numbers work in terms of our costs. It works out to somewhere between 5 and 10% visitors per day, or week or month, however you want to measure it, than the Exploratorium gets. I think we'd be able to do that. We would get not only tourists by the busload, but lots of kids coming on field trips, just like we do now. It's about 132,000 square feet, maybe 82,000 square feet of that is available because the Exploratorium is moving out of this home. And they're moving to Piers 15 and 17, starting in December of this year. By the middle of next year, they will have moved completely. The city of San Francisco, which owns the building, it's under the purview of the Rec and Park Department, is talking about carving this space up into thirds, maybe half. We would love to have 35 to 45,000 square feet, which would be double of what you have here at the Expo Hall, to have everything we talked about, 400, maybe 500 games on display, restoration classroom, oral history section, restaurant, gift shop, merchandise, etc. But again, we've had preliminary discussions with the city of San Francisco, and we are not the only people, the only organization that are in the running for this space because it's very desirable, obviously. We should know sometime in the next 6 to 12 months whether we've been selected as a tenant of this. It would be really, I think, just fantastic. I can't imagine a better spot to be in as a permanent home. One of the second choices would be in the Presidio. If you're familiar with the Presidio section of San Francisco, it's also very close to the Golden Gate Bridge. Right now in the Presidio, a lot of former buildings that were occupied by the Army are being redeveloped and repurposed. There's the Walt Disney Family Museum that's there. It's been there about 2 years now. It's been very successful. There are buildings adjacent to them, and I imagine that there would be people that have a ticket to go see that. Maybe they have an hour or two to kill, and they say, hey, honey, why don't we go take the kids to the Pinball Museum while we're here, while we're waiting? That's a possibility. Another possibility is down at the wharf. There are several piers there between Pier 39 and Pier 45. There's a successful Musée Mécanique that has a lot of things like dioramas and just sort of coin-op mechanical devices like that. The problem is the space there is very limited and you're near some pretty salty air. It's not good for pinball machines. Another reason why we're really looking at focusing on fundraising efforts to get a new home is because this show is really a lot of fun to put on. I mean, for 3 days, it's a gas. And not just as a visitor, but as an organizer and a participant, this thing is really, it's like nothing else. But the reality is, when you move 400 pinball machines, it's not good for the machines. It doesn't do them any good to get banged up and dinged around and moved and set up and then put up on 3 semi-trucks, taken off the trucks, set up, take them down again, put them on the trucks, put them back in the warehouse. It doesn't do them a justice, it's not fair to them, and it's also not fair to the machines to not be moved. In other words, the 600 or so games in our collection that are literally standing on their ends, off their legs and with their heads, sitting in the dark in a storage warehouse. It's not fair to them. They need to be set up and they need to be played and enjoyed. That's when the problems creep in, is when they're sitting there and not being used. We want them to be used and enjoyed. That's why we really do need to make this move, and we think it's, as we evolve, we don't really have a choice. I mean, we could stay in Alameda, we could put on this really cool show every year and kind of, make money every year and get by, but that's not enough. We want to be literally the Smithsonian. We want to be the authority of pinball, art and science and history and pinball, preserving pinball. That's our mission statement. That's what we do, and this is the best way we think we're going to be able to do that. I think we've already gone through this slide just now, but that's, by putting on the show, it really does detract a lot of energy and a lot of effort that we really should be spending building more science curriculum, making more community outreach programs, and frankly, fundraising. We've never really had a coordinated fundraising effort. We've always been too busy having fun, acquiring and restoring games. It's not our emphasis, making money. Yeah, it's cool, it's great if you can, but I don't think most nonprofits make money in the first place. That's really not our goal, is to see how much we can make. It's more like, at least in Mike and I's experience, it's more fun just to focus on, hey, look at this machine I got last week, or let's look at this latest thing that we restored and put into the collection. That's been our focus, not the capitalistic or the just the benefit of making money itself. So What we've done is this first fundraising effort of ours, we're trying to raise $1.5 million. And the website is called indiegogo.com. And you can go there and you can contribute anywhere from $5 to $25,000. You get various little perks along the way if you do that. So one of the, as you're sitting here tonight in the audience and asking yourself, well, how can I help? Maybe I can't help financially, but maybe I work for a corporation who would be willing to donate to a cause such as ours. Maybe you work for a foundation or know people that work in a foundation. You can help us spread the word with them. Do you know an individual who's a grant writer or a professional fundraiser? Send them our way. We'd be happy to talk to them. We really do need your help on a sort of a grassroots level. Your deduction as a 501c3 to us would be tax deductible. And if you want to, I think Mike referenced it before, but if you'd like to purchase one of the murals and you don't have room to put the mural in your house, no problem. You can hang it in the museum and put a little plaque that says this mural donated by Tanya Kleiss. It'd be great. And part of the sales price, 25% of the sales price would go to the artist. So it's a win-win. Let's see, where are we? Oh, yeah. Greetings, concern of pinball front. Okay.
So, we got into this Indigo fundraiser when we looked at, somebody started a page called Let's Build a Goddamn Tesla Museum. And they raised $1.8 million in less than 2 weeks. So we thought, well, they had no building, they have no plan other than the building was going to become available. This was Nikola Tesla's old laboratory out in New York State. I think it's called White Cliff or something like that. And that's where Tesla did his experiments up until when went broke, I guess. And it burned to the ground. They want to buy it. They're going to try and buy it and do a Tesla museum. So that's it. That was their plan. So Eric Koss and I looked at that and said, well, we got more than that. We got a bunch of machines. We've been developing all this material. We've got all these artists doing this incredible murals. We've got all these volunteers. We've got 10 years of track record. Why can't we do that? You know, why can't we start an Indigo fundraiser? So that's what we did. The idea is to get a war chest together, to get some funds together, because we have been putting money aside. You know, we generate a little excess from running the museum, and we're not quite as thrifty as Tim, but we're pretty thrifty. We don't. We like to, you know, we like to be able to spend money on certain things, but we save as much as we can. So we've saved a small little pile because it costs so much to do this and everything that we do. So now we have to reach outside in the pinball community and outside of the pinball community, because it's going to take a lot to build a pinball museum of this sort. This would only be, like I said, a war chest that would allow us to go to the powers that be and say, look, we're serious. We really want to do this. I believe they showed up at the show today to actually see what our organization does, because when we approached the Palace Fine Arts people, they thought, wow, this would fit in nice here. And they actually came down to inspect and see what we're doing. So, one basic thing you can do is if everybody could find somebody else to put $5 in, it wouldn't take too long. It'd take a lot of people, but if you could spread the word and just kick in $5. If you can do more, that'd be awesome. If you know somebody who might be interested in what we're doing, please spread the news. The only way this is going to happen is if we do it. At a certain point, we will be able to really go after grants and other funding like that. But it takes so long, and you have to do so much work to get to that point. And we're getting there. but we're not there quite yet, and we are going to reach out. I like to believe that we don't really reach out and ask for help much, because we've always been kind of self-sufficient. And we're proud of that. And we've done all this work in order to get it to this point, and now we are going to ask for help, because this last leg of the journey is the hardest one. So here are some of the friends of the Pacific Pinball Museum that have already helped us, and we really appreciate everybody's help. It's incredible. The pinball community is an incredible community. They will go to all sorts of trouble to get somebody a plastic part for their pinball machine, or a missing coil. I've always been amazed at how the pinball community just is, it's amazingly tight. There's a lot of drama sometimes. There's a lot of some little fighting here and there. But generally, I think we all love to help each other, and we all love to share our games with each other and our experiences. It's a pretty unique group of people. But unfortunately, I don't think that alone will build this museum. And not everybody in the pinball community is going to be interested in the museum. That's another reason we have to reach outside, because the people that we try to get into the museum are ones that aren't exposed to pinball. They don't know about it, but they know museums, and a lot of them like to go to museums, and when they hear pinball museum, they go, well, that's odd, but let's try it out. And it's amazingly successful. We've been doing it and getting like 4.5 stars on Yelp. We were 5 stars for the longest until one of Tim's friends came in and said, or maybe it was Tim, I don't know. But yeah, if you look at the reviews, we're very successful, and we're solvent, and our concept is permanence, and that's real key. We are laying a foundation for future generations. Larry and I aren't going to be fixing games in our 80s, are we? If we make them long.
Maybe not 70s.
Yeah. And you know, we don't want to. We're donating our games to this museum. I think one reason that this is at all possible is because I can actually walk away from a pinball machine. And it sounds weird, but I think a lot of people are so entwined that they can't walk away from them. And so they'll never get to the point where they can do a serious museum. I've got to the point where I don't have to own every machine. I think it'd be interesting to have it in a collection, but I have no interest in owning any of this stuff. I have an interest in sharing it. And Larry, fortunately, came on board with the same attitude. It's just like, yeah, it's really cool, let's share it. And so that is pretty incredible.
Yeah, sharing the experience is really what it's all about. It's not about how many you can acquire, but because I remember how much fun I had growing up as a kid, ages 5 through 12, with my family. My mom used to take my brother and me and my grandmother and our dog to Santa Cruz. We lived in Fresno, California, and we'd stay there for a week. And every day, my brother and I would be at the Coconut Grove arcade playing pinballs all day long. We'd play, we'd swim a little in the ocean because it was Santa Cruz and all. We basically got hooked on pinballs there, and those were some of the happiest days of our lives, I can recall. And I know how much fun pinball playing was and is for me, and I want to share that with other pinball enthusiasts of all ages. So again, ask yourself, what can I do to help these guys out? Even if I don't have $10,000 to be a Silver Ball Angel donor. Well, you can be an ambassador for pinball. Keep coming to pinball events, go to pinball shows, go to pinball museums, go all around the country, see what other people are doing. Talk to your friends about pinball. Hey, pinball's pretty cool. Social network, Facebook, Twitter. You tell your friends, they tell their friends. Pretty soon it grows virally and exponentially. Tell people about what we're about, what we're trying to do. That's all right. Again, the whole reason why this works, this whole structure of what we're trying to do works, is really because of the passion, dedication, and energy, and and timeless devotion to what it is that we believe in, the cause that we believe in. This is our board of directors. I think you probably know a lot of these folks, you probably recognize them out on the show floor. Say hi to them, thank them for what they're doing. And speaking of thanks, make sure you thank anyone wearing a volunteer t-shirt. This show doesn't happen without the help of 85 to 100 different, very dedicated volunteers. So again, thank you for coming and thank you for taking interest in what we're doing, and please help us out any way you can. We can. Yeah, we should. Do we have time for question and answers?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Randy.
Did I understand you to say something about 8 to 10% of what the museum is currently doing at the Exploratorium, you would require in order to survive at that location? I didn't quite catch.
In order to break even, based on what we think our rent would be, we would need to draw somewhere between 5 and 10% of the Exploratorium's visitors per year.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I think we could, for example, if the number is 180 visitors a day, I think we can do that if, let's say, 60 of them are adults and 130 are kids. That's not too many busloads of kids on a per day basis. And frankly, once the Exploratorium moves from the Palace of Fine Arts, I think we'll probably just get a lot of misguided people looking for the Exploratorium for the first couple of years maybe, so we can piggyback on the coattails of that goodwill. Hey honey, we're here already with the kids. We didn't rent it as a museum. And oh, but they happen to have pinball. What do you know?
If we were to locate at the Exploratorium, can you just tell us just a little bit about the parking facilities, hotels that are close by, that sort of thing?
Sure. The Exploratorium is located in the Marina District in San Francisco. It's very close to Chrissy Field and within walking distance of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Also Lombard.
And Lombard Avenue is known as Motel Row, so there's no shortage of motels nearby within walking distance, probably 3-4 blocks away.
Well, I spent most of the day Thursday in San Francisco, and it was difficult parking.
Yes, they recently had an expansion of the pathway, or the roadway that leads from Chrissy Field to the Golden Gate Bridge. They've widened the Doyle Drive project for the last year and a half to 2 years. So that did result in a slightly smaller parking lot, but there's more than ample room to park just across that main road at Chrissy Field. All sorts of ample parking there. And the Exploratorium's never had a problem with their parking situation.
And it's free.
And it is free.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, when we first announced that we were thinking about doing this, a lot of the people in San Francisco wrote on our Facebook saying, well, that would be horrible. You know, I live here in San Francisco, and I like driving over to Alameda, and if you put it here, that would be good. You know? And they go, besides, there's no parking out at the Exploratorium. And I go, wow, that's crazy, because there is parking, and I'm surprised how many people that lived in San Francisco didn't know about it. It's like, it's behind the Exploratorium. They opened up this big lot, and it's been there for years, but I guess if you went to the Exploratorium, 20 years ago, you might not know that there was that extra parking there. It's actually in the Presidio area, so it's kind of funny. And some of that's going to get eaten up by the roadway. Yeah, John?
You mentioned in the slideshow that it's going to take a hiatus next year, but I haven't heard any verbal explanation. Can you tell me what the plans
Of why,
are?
or?
No, of what the next 3 to 5 years is going to look like.
We hope, this is our hope, is by next year we'll be in some place where we can at least set up this many machines, and we're hoping that that's going to be the Palace of Fine Arts. Our secondary choice is going to be the Presidio, which is right next to the Palace of Fine Arts, as basically an overflow museum for the Disney Museum. The Disney Museum attracts so many people that it's just packed, and they actually need another venue to do that. Oh, yeah.
Do you have a phone about that third pin project, or?
We do. I'm waiting for Ron's cue. He's the Mr. Q man.
Oh, okay.
Can we take one more question?
One more, yeah, one more.
I'd just like to thank you for all your tireless effort and your dedication, both you guys and the whole board, and all the volunteers. But my question is that you sold the clear pen not not as a science exhibit, which was your original vision, but as a piece of art. I
Yeah.
think that speaks highly of the potential of future projects. You left out one, the William Wiley project. Could you talk about that for just a second?
Sure. The William Wiley project, that was interesting. And just to back up just real quick, it was sold, the visible pinball was sold as an art piece from one museum to another, and Tim, you'll appreciate this little trick. In doing that, we paid no taxes on it. It was sold, it was, the check was written to the Pacific Pinball Museum, and then and a little portion of that was given to me for, I built the first one totally on my own nickel, and then I paid Wade a percentage off of that also. So, because Wade and I pretty much designed and built it. And so that was pretty cool. And it also established me as an artist. It's kind of neat. Your question about William Wiley, that was a project that produced, and I don't think a lot of people know this, produced the most expensive pinball machine ever made. They sold for $125,000 each. The last three of them, I believe they sold a total of 6. And that was William Wiley. He was a very famous North American artist. And he made a machine called Pinball. Jim Dietrich, who's on our board, runs Pinball Revival in Novato, teamed up with Wade, and they together produced the machine, which is based on a North Star. William Wiley did all the artwork. Wade screened it all on back glass and on the play field. And another artist, I forget his name, I think it was a letter number combination.
Adam 2000.
What was it?
Adam 2000.
Adam 2000 did the cabinetry and ended up showing it at a high-end art gallery. And they sold the first one, we took to San Jose Art Gallery and they snapped it up. It was out of all the things they were looking at that day for purchase, they only bought one, and it was the William Wiley Pinball. They bought it for $65,000, I think. Then the other ones went to the, it wasn't a Warhol gallery. No, it was a gallery in San
Rosa
Francisco.
Museum bought one.
Yeah, they, so the DeRosa Museum bought one, so they went on sale, and they all just got bought like that, with the last 3 going for $125,000 each. The prices kept going up when they kept selling them, and then by the time they hit the gallery, they were that high. They all got bought. The museum happens to have one example of the playfield and head. So we actually have a partial that my wife bought for the museum, I hope. For her own collection. The one thing is the museum kind of got started to get pinball out of my house so that I wouldn't end up divorced. And many years later, well, I care about my wife. I want her to be happy. And I saw a lot of people, a lot of pinball widows out there. So the concept was get the pins out of the house and wife will be happy. 9 years later, who comes home with her first pinball machine and puts it in the house? My wife. Now she's up to 3. I like that. Okay, now we're going to show with a visible pinball film.
Just tell Martin will cue it up.
Okay, and so one last thing is Anna Newman. Anna Newman's been incredible. She came on to do the Pinball Donut Girl. She needed a place to shoot it, so we said, well, yeah, the warehouse. So they tried the museum, but that wasn't going to work. So we opened up the warehouse, and so Anna and she had a whole crew, and she raised also on Indiegogo enough money to do this film, Pinball Donut Girl. And on a side project, she filmed Wade Krauss, Pinball Artist, and then she did a little thing about the visible pinball machine. So she's really kind of come into the pinball world, and I hope she hasn't been beaten up or scratched too badly. But we really appreciate all the work she's done. She's also helping us with our Indiegogo fundraising and doing a little short for that. So at this point. So, without further ado, I guess we can leave that.